The story of the magic horse. In the land of the Persians, there lived in ancient times a king who had 3 daughters and only 1 son, of such beauty that they drew the eyes of all beholders like moonrise in a clear heaven. Now, it was the custom in that country for a great festival to be held at the New Year, during which people of all grades, from the highest to the lowest, presented themselves before the king with offerings and salutations. So it happened that on one of these days there came to the king, as he sat in the state, 3 sages, masters of their craft, bringing gifts of approval. The first had with him a peacock of gold, which was so constructed that at the passing of each hour it beat its wings and uttered a cry. And the king, having proved it, found the gift acceptable and caused the inventor thereof to be suitably rewarded. The second had made a trumpet so that if placed over the gates of a city, it blew a blast against any that sought to enter. And thus was the city held safe from surprise by an enemy. And when the king had found that it possessed that property, he accepted it, bestowing on its maker a rich reward. But the gift of the third sage, who was an Indian, appeared more prodigious than all, for he had brought with him a horse of ivory and ebony, for which he claimed that, at the will of its owner or of any one instructed in the secret, it would rise above the earth and fly, arriving at distant places in a marvelously short space of time. The king, full of wonder at such a statement and eager to test it, was in some doubt as to how he might do so, for the Indian was unwilling to part with the secret until secure of the reward, which in his own mind he had fixed on. Now it happened that at a distance of some 3 leagues from the city there stood a mountain, the top of which was clearly discernible to all eyes. So, in order that the Indian's word might be proved, the king pointed to it, said, "Go yonder, bring back to me while I wait the branch of a palm tree, which grows at the foot of that mountain. Then I shall know that which you tell me is true." Instantly the Indian set foot in the stirrup and vaulted upon his charger. Scarcely had he turned a small peg which was set in the pommel of the saddle, when the horse rose lightly into the air and bore him away at wondrous speed, amid the shouts of the beholders. And while all were still gazing, amazed at so sudden a vanishing, he reappeared high overhead, bearing the palm branch, and descending into their midst, alighted upon the very spot from which he had started, where, prostrating himself, he laid the branch at the king's feet. As he descended, the daylight in which hitherto he had been traveling faded from view. The king was so delighted when the wonderful properties of the horse had been thus revealed to him, that, eager to possess it, he bade the Indian name his own reward, declaring that no prize could be too great. Then the sage said, "Since your majesty so truly appreciates the value of my invention, I do not fear that the reward I ask for will seem too high. Give me in marriage the hand of the fairest of your 3 daughters, and the horse shall be yours." At so arrogant a claim, all the courtiers burst into a loud laughter. The king alone, consumed with the desire of possessing the wonderful treasure, hesitated as to what answer he should give. The king's son, Prince Firoz Shah, seeing his father lend ear to so shameful a proposal, became moved with indignation. Determined to defend his sister's honor and his own, he addressed the king. "Pardon me, sire," said he, "if I take the liberty of speaking, but how shall it be possible for one of the greatest and most powerful monarchs to ally himself to a mere nobody? I entreat you to consider what is due not to yourself alone, but to the high blood of your ancestors and your children." "My son," replied the king of Persia, "what you say is very true, so far as it goes, but you do not sufficiently consider the value of so incomparable a marvel as this horse has proved itself to be, or how great would be my chagrin if any other monarch came to possess it. And though I have not yet agreed to the Indian's proposal, I cannot incontinently reject it. Incontinently reject it. But first I must be satisfied that the horse will obey other hands besides those of its inventor, else, though I became its possessor, I may find it useless." The Indian, who had stood aside during this discussion, was now full of hope, for he perceived that the king had not altogether rejected his terms, and nothing seemed likelier than that the more he became familiar with the properties of the magic horse, the more would he wish to possess it. When, therefore, the king proposed that the horse should be put to a more independent trial under another rider, the Indian readily agreed. The more so when the prince himself, relinquishing his apparent opposition, came forward and volunteered for the essay. The king having consented, the prince mounted, and eager in his design to give his father opportunity for the cooler reflection, he did not wait to hear all the Indian's instructions, but turning the peg as he had seen the other do when first mounting, caused the horse to rise suddenly in the air, and was carried away out of sight in an easterly direction more swiftly than an arrow shot from a bow. No sooner had the horse and its rider disappeared than the king became greatly concerned for his son's safety, and though the sage could justly excuse himself on the ground that the young prince's impatience had caused him to cut short the instruction which would have ensured his safe return, the king chose to vent upon the Indian the full weight of his displeasure, and cursing the day wherein he had first set eyes on the magic horse, he caused its maker to be thrown into prison, declaring that if the prince did not return within a stated time, the life of the other should be forfeit. And we have part 2 here, it seems. Okay. Oh, okay. Here we go. And part 3. Oh my god, there's so much more than I thought. Well, and part 4? Holy. How many parts are there? I thought there were only one part. Part 6? One each day. 6 parts! Oh my. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, we can for sure part it up for other days, but I feel like we should read part 2 as well. And we'll end it on a cliffhanger. How about that? Guess it's gonna have to be a series. It is gonna have to be a series. But we'll do part 2 as well, because I'm feeling it. Okay. The Story of the Magic Horse, Part 2. The Indian had now good cause to repent of the ambition which had brought him to this extremity, for the prince, of whose opposition to his project he had been thoroughly informed, had only to prolong his absence to involve him in irretrievable ruin. But on the failure of arrogant pretensions, the sympathy of the judicious is wasted. But on the failure of arrogant pretensions, the sympathy of the judicious is wasted. Let us return therefore to Prince Firoz Shah, whom we left flying through the air with incredible swiftness, on the back of the magic steed. For a time, confident of his skill as a rider and undismayed either by the speed or altitude of his flight, the prince had no wish to return to the palace. But presently the thought of his father's anxiety occurred to him, and being of a tender and considerable disposition, he immediately endeavored to divert his steed from its forward course. This sought to do by turning in the contrary direction the peg which he had handled when mounting. But to his astonishment, the horse responded by rising still higher in the air and flying forward with redoubled swiftness. Had courage then deserted him, his situation might have become perilous, but preserving his accustomed coolness, he began carefully to search for the means by which the speed of the machine might be abated. And before long he perceived under the horse's mane a smaller peg, which he had no sooner touched than he felt himself descending rapidly toward the earth, with a speed that lessened the nearer he came to ground. I love it. All the courtiers burst into a loud laughter. These are the courtiers bursting into the laughter. As he descended, the daylight in which hitherto he had been traveling faded from view, and he passed within a few minutes from sunset into an obscurity so dense that he could no longer distinguish the nature of his environment till, as the horse alighted, he perceived beneath him a smooth expanse ending abruptly on all sides at an apparent elevation among the objects surrounding it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh. There we go. Just gotta close the door so I don't hear the water. As he descended, the daylight in which hitherto he had been traveling faded from view, and he passed within a few minutes from sunset into an obscurity so dense that he could no longer distinguish the nature of his environment, till, as the horse alighted, he perceived beneath him a smooth expanse ending abruptly on all sides at an apparent elevation among the objects surrounding it. Dismounting, he found himself on the roof of a large palace, with marble balustrades dividing it in terraces, and at one side a staircase which led down to the interior. With a spirit ever ready for adventure, Prince Firoz Shah immediately descending, groping his way through the darkness till he came to a landing on the further side of which an open door led into a room where a dim light was burning. The prince paused at the doorway to listen, but all he could hear was the sound of men breathing heavily in their sleep. He pushed the door and entered, and there, across an inner threshold, he saw black slaves lying asleep, each with a drawn sword in his hand. Immediately he guessed that something far more fair must lie beyond. So, undeterred by the danger, he advanced and, stepping lightly across their swords, passed through silken hangings into the inner chamber. Here he perceived, amid surroundings of regal magnificence, a number of couches, one of which stood higher than the rest. Upon each of these a fair damsel lay asleep, but upon that which was raised above its fellows lay a form of such perfect and enchanting beauty that the prince had no will or power to turn away after once beholding it. Approaching the sleeper softly, he kneeled down and plucked her gently by the sleeve, and immediately the princess, for such of rank and beauty accorded she needs must be, opened to him the depths of her lustrous eyes, and gazed in quiet amazement at the princely youth whose handsome looks and reverent demeanor banished at once all thought of alarm. Now it so happened that a son of the King of India was at that time seeking the hand of the princess in marriage, But her father, the king of Bengal, had rejected him owing to his ferocious and disagreeable aspect. When therefore the princess saw one of royal appearance kneeling before her, she supposed he could be no other than the suitor whom she knew only by report. And shedding upon him the light of her regard, she said, smiling, "By Allah," she said, smiling, "my father lied in saying that good looks were lacking to thee." Prince Firoz Shah, perceiving from these words and the glance which accompanied them that her disposition towards him was favorable, no longer feared to acquaint her with the plight in which he found himself. While the princess, for her part, listened to the story of his adventures with lively interest, and learned not without secret satisfaction that her visitor possessed a rank and dignity equal to her own. Meanwhile, the maidens who were in attendance on the princess had awakened in dismay to the unaccountable apparition of a fair youth kneeling at the feet of their mistress, and, dreading discovery by the attendants, were all at a loss what to do. A raid? Welcome in, Cerritius. Welcome in. Sit down, everyone, and enjoy the reading. We're doing a reading of the story of the magic horse. So thank you for the raid, and welcome in. Just lean all the way back and grab your blankets and warm drinks, yes, and enjoy. Thank you, Jesper, for the follow. Thank you so much. Whew. Whoa. You're worthy of the hammer. Alright, continuing the story of the magic horse, part 2. Meanwhile, the maidens who were in attendance on the princess had awakened in dismay to the unaccountable apparition of a fair youth kneeling at the feet of their mistress, and, dreading discovery by the attendants, were all at a loss what to do. The princess, however, maybe I should get some other alerts when we're reading to make them a little bit more behind. Thank you so much, Cerritius. Thank you so much for 11 months. Amazing.
6 billion trillion hexamillion points from Urgie.
Thank you so much, Cerritius. Thanks for a reminder. I forgot my tea was also brewing. Get your teas, guys. Thank you so much for the raid and the resub. That is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, lean back and enjoy. Meanwhile, the maidens who were in attendance on the princess had awakened in dismay to the unaccountable apparition of a fair youth kneeling at the feet of their mistress, and, dreading discovery by the attendants, were all at a loss what to do. The princess, however, seeing that they were awake, called them to her with perfect composure and bade them go instantly and prepare an inner chamber where the prince might sleep and recover from the fatigues of his journey. At the same time, she gave orders for a rich banquet to be prepared against the time when he should be ready to partake of it. Then, when her visitor had retired, she arose and began to adorn herself in jewels and rich robes, and to anoint her body with fragrance, giving her woman no rest till the tale of her mirror contented her. And when all had been done many times over, and the last touch of art added to her loveliness, she sent to inquire whether the prince had yet awakened and were ready to receive her. Upon the receipt of that message, the prince rose eagerly, and dressing in haste, although it was scarcely yet day, heard everywhere within the palace sounds of preparation for the feast that was being got ready in his honor. Before long, the princess herself entered to inquire how he had slept, and being fully assured on that score, she gave orders for the banquet to be served. Everything was done in the greatest magnificence, but the princess was full of apologies, declaring the entertainment unworthy of so distinguished a guest. "You must pardon me, my prince," she said, "for receiving you with so little state, and after so hasty a preparation. But the chief of the eunuchs does not enter here without my express permission, and I fear that elsewhere our conversation might be interrupted." Let's do part 3 as well, huh? Let's do part 3 as well. Skeleton Champion, welcome in. Let's do part 3. We're having a good time, guys. Come on, let's just keep it going. The Story of the Magic Horse, part 3. 3. Prince Firoz Shah was now convinced that the inclinations of the princess corresponded with his own. But though her every word and movement increased the tenderness of his passion, he did not forget the respect due to her rank and virtue. One of her women attendants, however, seeing clearly in what direction matters were tending, and fearing for herself the results of a sudden discovery, withdrew secretly, saying nothing to the rest, and running quickly to the chief of the guards, she cried, "O miserable man! What sorry watch is this that thou hast kept, guarding the king's honor? And who is this man or genie that thou hast admitted to the presence of our mistress? Nay, if the matter be not already past remedy, the fault is not thine." Brain voice. Till the tale of her merry contender. Ah, this is her getting ready. She's getting ready here. Tickles my ear balls. At these words, he quickly leapt up in alarm, and going secretly, he lifted the curtain of the inner chamber, and there beheld at the princess's side a youth of such fair and majestical appearance that he durst not intrude unbidden. He ran shrieking to the king, and as he went, he rent his garments and threw dust upon his head. "O sire and master," he cried, "come quickly and save thy daughter, for there is within her a genie in mortal form." Thank you, skeleton, for the follow. Whoa, you're worthy. "Come quickly and save thy daughter, for there is with her a genie in mortal form, and like a king's son to look upon, and if he have not already carried her away, make haste and give orders that he be seized, lest thou become childless." The king at once arose and went in great haste and fear to his daughter's palace. There he was met by certain of her women, who, seeing his alarm, said, "O sire, have no fear for the safety of thy daughter, for this young man is as handsome of heart as of person, and his conduct is chaste, so also are his intentions honorable." Then the king's wrath was cooled somewhat, but since much remained which demanded explanation, he drew his sword and advanced with a threatening aspect into the room where his daughter and the prince still sat conversing. Prince Firoz Shah, observing the newcomer advance upon him in a warlike attitude, drew his own sword and stood ready for defense. Whereupon the king, seeing that the other was the stronger, sheathed his weapon, and with a gesture of salutation addressed him courteously. "Tell me, fair youth," he said, "whether you are man or devil, for though in appearance you are human, how else than by devilry have you come here?" "Sire," replied the youth, "but for the respect that is owing to the father of so fair a daughter, I, who am a son of kings, might resent such an imputation. Be assured, however, that by whatever means I have chosen to arrive, my intentions now are altogether human and honorable, for I have no other or dearer wish than to become your son-in-law, through my marriage with this princess in whose eyes it is my happiness to have found favor." "What you tell me," answered the king, "may be all true, but it is not the custom for the sons of kings to enter into palaces without the permission of their owners, coming, moreover, unannounced and with no retinue or mark of royalty about them. How then shall I convince my people that you are a fit suitor for the hand of my daughter?" "The proof of honor and kingship," answered the other, "does not rest in splendor and retinue alone, though these also would be at my call had I the patience to await their arrival from that too distant country where my father is the king. Let it suffice if I shall be able to prove my worth alone and unaided in such a manner as to satisfy all." "Alone and unaided?" said the king. "How may that be?" "I will prove it thus," answered the prince. "Call out your troops, let them surround the palace. Tell them that you have here a stranger of whom nothing is known, who declares that if you will not yield him the hand of your daughter in marriage, he will carry her away from you by force. Bid them use all means to capture and slay me, and if I survive so unequal a contest, judge then whether or no I am fit to become your son-in-law." The king immediately accepted the proposal, agreeing to abide by the result, yet was he grieved that a youth of such fair looks and promise should throw away his life in so foolhardy an adventure. As soon as day dawned, he sent for his vizier and bade him cause all the chiefs of his army to assemble with their troops and companies. Till presently there were gathered about the palace 40,000 horsemen and the same number on foot. And the king gave them instructions, saying, "When the young man of whom I have warned you comes forth and challenges you to battle, then fall upon him and slay him, for in no wise must he escape." He then led the prince to an open space whence he could see the whole army drawn up in array against him. "Yonder," said the king, pointing, "are those with whom you have to contend. Go forth and deal with them as seems best to you." "Nay," answered the prince, "these are not fair conditions, for yonder I see horsemen as well as foot. How shall I contend against these unless I be mounted?" The king at once offered him the best horse in his stables, but the prince would not hear of it. "Is it fair," he said, "that I should trust my life under such conditions to a horse that I have never ridden? I will ride no horse but that upon which I came hither." "Where is that?" inquired the king. If it be where I left it," answered the prince, "it is upon the roof of the palace." Here they are. She gave orders for the banquet to be served. They're serving the banquet. Are they serving a bird? No. What was that called? Isn't that a oh, I don't remember the English name for it. Peacock, yeah. All right. All who heard this answer were filled with laughter and astonishment, for it seemed impossible that a horse could have climbed to so high a roof. Nevertheless, the king commanded that search should be made, and there, sure enough, those that were sent found the horse of ebony and ivory, standing stiff and motionless. So though it still seemed to them but a thing for jest and mockery, obeying the king's orders, they raised it upon their shoulders, and bearing it to earth, carried it forth into the open space before the palace, where the king's troops were assembled. Let's do one more. One more? Or leave it's three more, I think. It's three more. We could end it here and leave the other three for the next time. It's a good cliffhanger, but it's also a good time. One more. Uno más. Uno más calls electrifying E. Uno más, please. Let's do one more. We're just gonna say one more until we get to the end, aren't we? Might as well at this point. At this point. Okay. The story of the magic horse, part 4. Then Prince Firoz Shah advanced, and leaping upon the horse, he cried defiance to the 80,000 men that stood in battle array against him. And they, on their part, seeing the youth so heartily set on his own destruction, drew sword and couched spear, and came all together to the charge. The prince waited till they were almost upon him. Then turning the peg which stood in the pommel of his saddle, he caused the horse to rise so suddenly in the air, and all the foremost ranks of the enemy came clashing together beneath him. At that sight, the king and all his court drew a breath of astonishment, and the army staggered and swung about it this way and that, striking vainly up at the hoofs of the magic horse as it flew over them. Then the king, full of dread lest this should indeed be some evil genie that sought to carry his daughter away from him, called to his archers to shoot. But before they could make ready their bows, Prince Firoz Shah had given another turn to the peg, and immediately the horse sprang upward and rose higher than the roof of the palace, so that all the arrows fell short and rained destruction on those that were below. Then the prince called the king, "O King of Bengal, have I not now proved myself worthy to be thy son-in-law, and wilt thou not give me the hand of thy daughter in marriage?" But the king's wrath was very great, for he had been made foolish in the eyes of his people, and panic had broken the ranks of his army, and many of them were slain. And by no means would he have for his son-in-law one that possessed such power to throw down the order and establishment of his kingdom. So he cried back to the prince, saying, "O vile enchanter, get hence as thou valuest thy life. For if ever thou darest to return and set foot within my dominion, thy death, and not my daughter, shall be thy reward." Thus he spoke in his anger, forgetting altogether the promise he had made. Now it should be known that all this time the princess had been watching the combat from the roof of the palace, and as her fear and anxiety for the prince had in the first instance been great, so now was she overjoyed when she saw him rise superior to the dangers which had threatened him. But as soon as she heard her father's words, she became filled with fresh fear lest she and her lover were now to be parted. So as the prince came speeding upon the magic horse, she stretched up her arms to him, crying, "O master of the flying bird, leave me not desolate, for if thou goest from me now, I shall die." No sooner did Prince Firoz Shah hear those words than he checked his steed in its flight, and swooping down low, he bore down over the palace roof, and catching the princess up in his arms, placed her upon the saddle before him. And straightway at the pressure of its rider, the horse rose under them and carried them high away in air, so that they disappeared forthwith from the eyes of the king and his people. But as they traveled, the day grew hot, and the sun burned fiercely upon them. And the prince, looking down, beheld a green meadow by the side of a lake. So he said, "O desire of my heart, let us go down into yonder meadow and seek rest and refreshment, and there let us wait till it is evening, so that we may come unperceived to my father's palace. And when I have brought thee thither safely and secretly, then I will make preparations, so that thou mayest appear at my father's court in such a manner as befit thy rank." So the princess consenting, they went down and sat by the lake and solaced themselves sweetly with love till it was evening. Then they rose up and mounted once more upon the magic horse and came by night to the outskirts of the city where dwelt the king of Persia. Now, in the garden of the summer palace which stood without the walls, all was silence and solitude. And coming thither and perceived the king's son, led the princess to a pavilion, the door of which lay open, and placing before it the magic horse, he bade her stay within and keep watch till his messenger should come to take her to the palace, which he would cause to be prepared for her. Leaving her thus safely sheltered, the prince went into the city to present himself before the king his father, and there he found him in deep mourning and affliction because of his son's absence. And his father, seeing him, rose up and embraced him tenderly, rejoicing because of his safe return, and eager to know in what way he had fared. And the prince said, "O my father, if it be thy good will and pleasure, I have come back to thee far richer than I went, for I have brought with me the fairest princess that the eyes of love have ever looked upon. And she is the daughter of the king of Bengal, and because of my love for her, and the great service which she rendered me when I was a stranger in the midst of enemies, therefore I have no heart or mind or will but to win your consent that I may marry her." And when the king heard that, and of all the princess had done, and of all that the princess had done, and of how they had escaped together, he gave his consent willingly, and ordered that a palace should be immediately got ready for a reception, that she might on the next day appear before the people in a manner befitting her rank. Then, while preparation was going forward, the prince sought news concerning the sage, for he feared that the king might have slain him. "Do not speak of him," cried the king. "Would to heaven that I had never set eyes on him or his invention, for out of this has arisen all my grief and lamentation. Therefore he now lies in prison, awaiting death." "Nay," said the prince, "now surely should he be released and suitably rewarded, seeing that unwittingly he hath been the cause of my fortune. But do not give him my sister in marriage." There we go. There we are. And I guess we'll do the next ones, two more, tomorrow, at the end of the stream. I think it's a good cliffhanger to